On this episode, we have a conversation with J.P. Gance talking about the importance of healthy marriages to a healthy church. Well, hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Church Leadership Lab, where we get to have conversations that help empower healthy churches. That is our goal here. So every conversation we have, we hope helps with that. Again, thanks for joining us today. I'm excited to jump in, but before we do, I do want to ask a favor of you. If you could, if you're listening to the Apple Podcasts, if you could leave a review of the show, we would so appreciate that. One of the things we're trying to do is help more church leaders learn and grow and join this community. And the reviews, the comments, the links that are shared all really help with that. So if it's not too much, we would love for you to do that, again, to help us get these conversations into the ears of more church leaders. Okay, on to our conversation with J.P. J.P. Gance is the founder and president of Communio, the co-author of Endgame, the church's strategic move to save faith and family in America, and the author of the nationwide study on faith and relationships. Now, Communio is a ministry originally incubated as the Culture of Freedom Initiative at the Philanthropy Roundtable, where J.P. served as the organization's executive vice president. The initiative raised and spent $20 million over 3 years in 3 different states, seeking to identify the most effective strategies to boost marital health, family stability, and church engagement. From 2016 to 2018, the experimental initiative worked with an ecumenical network of churches and drove down the divorce rate by 24% in Jacksonville, Florida. Today, Communio serves churches across the U.S., helping them evangelize by applying the learnings from their successful intervention in Jacksonville. A husband and a father, JP lives in Virginia with his wife and 8 children, and we're so excited to bring this conversation to you today. Well, JP, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. I appreciate it.
Scott, great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, we're going to jump into our conversation. Now, we just kind of shared the public bio, but one thing I love to ask all of our guests, what is something that doesn't make the public bio, but all your friends, all your family would know about you?
Oh, man. I'm a big sports geek, sports pages. You know, growing up, I loved reading box scores and checking the stats at the, bright and early each morning. And I remain a bit of a sports stat geek is maybe one of the things that doesn't commonly make the bio here.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this. Have you ever gone to like a baseball game and done the old school, like keeping score?
Keeping score, yes.
Pencil,
yes,
paper.
It's a great way to also teach your kids to try to follow along when they're just starting to get into baseball, and kind of want them to follow the game and not just goof around. So that's a good way to do it. I did radio play-by-play in college.
Fun
for college teams. So I was never any good at baseball, but I love baseball.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love it. Well, we're going to jump in to our conversation, but one of the things I'd love to do just as we start is if you could just give us the origin story of Communio. How did it start?
Yeah.
Kind of what's the vision? Help us kind of understand that.
Yeah. It in so many ways it has its origins in my own upbringing. I was raised in a great family who loved our Lord and motivated me to try to affect change in a positive way in the world. So I moved to DC largely to try to do that, affect change in our country, motivated on the life issue, and got involved in public policy. And then God started redirecting my heart in some pretty significant ways. It'll be 16 years ago this summer. I had a close family member whose family failed, and we took in her 4 kids and really experienced what happens when families fail. It was an abusive relationship, and really the kids ended up living with us long term. Ended up they were 10, 11, 14, and 15, and it was that journey. We made a ton of mistakes and learned a lot along the way, but really seeing the wounds that come from that kind of tragedy. It made me God put on my heart that there's things a lot more upstream and more important than what's going on in the public policy process. That became more and more clear to me also on a professional level, right? So much of what's going on in our country really is wrapped up in the crisis of the American soul. And it's the breakdown of faith in Jesus Christ and the breakdown of the family. And a professional opportunity came along where I was to go. An organization called the Philanthropy Roundtable was looking for a new chief operating officer. I went over there and ended up talking to the president. Said, "Look, I don't know what it looks like yet, but I want to work with philanthropists to think through how do we bring strategy and best practices into the ministry space to affect change on faith outcomes as well as on family outcomes." And so that began the journey, and I ended up starting a project that would become Communio. And we did a 3-city experiment in 3 different states, trying to figure out ways to apply really cool tools in marketing, outreach, as well as ministry best practices, bring them in at scale in a citywide way. And we ended up hitting pay dirt in Jacksonville, Florida. This initiative ended up lowering the divorce rate there countywide by 24% in That's 3 awesome. Years, from 2016 to 2018. Yeah, praise God, it was amazing. And we really looked at and distilled what worked, what didn't work so well. And there's a lot that didn't work. And we paid a lot of tuition in that time. And then brought it into our go forward strategy, which was our bet was there's one institution, that's the local church, that we really want to make a big bet on, right? Jesus established this institution, the church, to bring salvation into the world, and so and proclaim the gospel. So we want to run fast and run hard behind the local church to do that. And so since 2019, we rebranded as Communio, and have been working. We've worked in 20 different states, 250 churches around the country, to affect improvements in faith and family outcomes. If we work with Trinitarian churches that hold to a biblical worldview on marriage, and it's God just keeps opening doors for us as we go.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love your heart for the local church and really, really looking to partner with. Can you kind of help us understand the impact that marriages, relationships have on the health of a local church?
Yeah.
Both when the relationships are healthy, but also when they're not.
This is perhaps the biggest area that we want to proclaim to church leaders, to help them understand that if we want to really get at the root of why religious non-affiliation, why faith in Jesus Christ is declining on a societal-wide level, right? Over the last 40 years, it's actually has its origins in the collapse of marriage and the family. Okay, and we published a study on this, Scott, the nationwide study on faith and relationships. Your listeners can download it, communio.org/study, and get it. And in there, what we find is 80% of everybody, regardless of denomination, and regardless of state, sitting in the pews on Sunday morning, 80% of them grew up in a home where mom and dad stayed continuously married. Okay, and that holds regardless of your age. So think of it this way: if you're born in 1999 and you're a single guy, or you're born in 1964 and you're a married man in church on Sunday, 81% of your peers sitting in church on Sunday from that demographic, from both demographics, grew up in a home where mom and dad stayed continuously married. Right? Okay. So what's changed? The earth that moved and shifted under our feet over the last 60 years has been family structure. The number of people growing up in a two-parent, reaching adulthood in a two-parent married home has been on steep decline. We're now somewhere, if you're under the age of 35, in all likelihood, less than half of your peers in that age group grew up in a home with continuously married parents, right? And so there's just less and less of, and it shouldn't surprise us, right? That as Christians, we know that God so loved the world that he sent his only son, right? To die and die for our sins and redeem us, right? And it was the Heavenly Father that sent His Son. And those who now don't experience the love of an earthly father and experience that in their life, or perhaps worse, experience a really bad relationship with an earthly father, it's really hard for what we're seeing in the data. Yeah. Is it's harder for you to accept the love of the Heavenly Father. And so it's our key message to churches. If your marriage, ministry to help people think through and discern marriage well for our singles, it's actually core to advancing the gospel in the 21st century.
Well, if you're in ministry, then you know church operations can be a huge challenge. There's a lot to do, little time to do it, and whether it's just you or you have a team, my guess is you have a full plate. So how do you do things like communication and engagement, stewarding your finances, managing your digital presence, fostering community, and so much more in a way that builds a healthy church? Well, answering that question was the goal of creating the Guide to Healthy Church Operations. We wanted to take our 40 plus years of experience serving the church, combined with wisdom from various experts to provide a blueprint for how you can navigate the ever-changing world of church operations. In this guide, you'll find things like how to improve member engagement and participation, building into staff and volunteers, making better decisions with clear metrics, the essentials of financial stewardship for churches, and so much more. And of course, we wanted to give this to you for free. So there's a link in the show notes to download the Guide to Healthy Church Operations. And we would love for you to grab a copy and use it to help grow a healthy church. Well, I'd love to kind of hit on that because you mentioned married, you mentioned singles, and I know that there's kind of a balance, right? And people are all along the spectrum there. And so how can churches kind of balance that? Certainly the need to pour into marriages, families, and strengthen them, with the equally important need to pour into single, non-married people. Like what have you seen for that balance to look like, to cultivate healthy relationships?
We all hunger and desire to know and to be known, to love and to be loved, single and married. Okay. Yeah. And so our message to churches is we talk about a full circle relationship ministry. That means for every stage of relationship life. And that's a huge emphasis. We bristle a little bit at being described sometimes as a marriage ministry because we're about promoting healthy relationships in marriage and healthy marriages, Christian marriages, right? And by healthy relationships, we mean gospel affirming relationships, right? And so single life today, there's all those very remote from the idea of marriage, being very young, those who have experienced trauma in their family background and think the idea of marriage sounds horrible. You've got folks who may be single again for a variety of reasons, tragic and otherwise. And so we want to help equip the local church to love, serve, and minister to those people well, consistent with the gospel, right? And while we've never been at a time in our history where there's more unmarried people as adults in our population. That's for sure true. I think it's important for church leaders to know is that biblically speaking, the most common path, while not everybody is called to marriage, for sure, okay? The most common path biblically to grow in a life of holiness is the married life, okay? And so we need, from an early age, to equip our young people to know how to date well, to form meaningful, lifelong relationships, and then to know the right cadence for how to enter into an authentic Christian marriage that's healthy, right? That's healthy, that glorifies God, right? And our local churches should be schools of love. It should be so clear that the way we love is so different than those out in the world that people are trying to break down the doors and crawl in the windows to know what we have, right? And that's the great opportunity, I believe, for the local church to advance the gospel through this powerful felt need right now is the absence of healthy relationships. And since Christ walked the earth, Jesus advanced the gospel through felt needs, right? He could have done signs and wonders that were card tricks, but he didn't.
Yeah.
Right? It was around felt needs. And there's no bigger felt need based on the data than the absence of healthy relationships, the explosive growth of loneliness.
Yeah. Well, like you said, that desire to know and be known, like that is fundamental, I think, to the human soul. I think we are hardwired with that as we're made in God's image to live in community. And certainly for a lot that will, eventually progress to a married relationship, but those connections, those relationships, that community, like that begins far before that. And so helping cultivate those and understand what does that look like in a healthy way, I think is so fundamental to seeing the church thrive and seeing the church be a community that people look at and say, I don't see that anywhere else in the world. And there's something in my soul that longs for that.
Yeah, we're hardwired for it. My friend, Dr. Brad Wilcox, has got a great new book out. I'd encourage anybody to pick up. I don't own stock shares in Brad Wilcox, but if I did, I'd be doing really well right now. Brad is his book, Get Married, is written from a secular mindset, trying to convince a secular audience about how powerful and important marriage is. And it turns out that if we're interested in happiness, if we just want people to maximize their happiness, just setting aside the much higher goods of salvation, and obviously these two things are deeply intertwined, happiness and salvation, obviously. But I'm saying from a secular mindset, right? The happiest people in America are married people with children. That's actually, he goes into it in his book. And the most happy people in America are Americans who report having a very good marriage. They're the happiest of all Americans by a large margin. It's not particularly close. And so in some ways, this is a great opportunity. This new data presents a great opportunity to the local church that actually we have the answers to life's big questions.
Yeah.
And it's time to equip our people to know that if you want to be happy, certainly the world's message on sex and relationships isn't leading to the kind of happiness that you'll have when you follow a life of fidelity to the gospel, for sure.
Yeah.
And we can share really good and robust data that supports a biblical worldview.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned before, obviously, the reality of brokenness and the reality that marriages fail, that there are broken relationships and there's a ton of damage that happens from that. But I would love to know, again, knowing kind of, we're talking to church leaders here, how can church leaders effectively walk alongside people who have experienced a broken marriage or are maybe even kind of walking through and processing that right now?
Yeah, let me get to that by first taking a quick step back and say, I think it's key for our churches to normalize the idea that everybody in the church invests and grow and is intentional about trying to grow in the health of their own marriage. Okay, if you're a church leader listening to this podcast and you went on a spiritual retreat of some sort and you came back and you shared with somebody, Scott, I went on a spiritual retreat last weekend. That your initial response is probably very positive. Like, that's great. I'm so glad you did that. You're to grow in your relationship with Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Now, if I came back and said, Scott, look, hey, my wife and I, Christine and I, we went on a marriage retreat weekend, or we went to a marriage class last week. What's the reaction that most people have? Most people, and if you're hearing this and you're thinking, well, maybe JP and Christine were having some problems. If that's
you guys okay?
the reaction, that's the enemy. That's the enemy. We have to destroy that, and we have to make it normal that everybody invests in their relationship. If we do that more, we're going to have less and less trauma, less and less people experiencing trauma. Because if you can, the literature is overwhelming on this. If you engage in a prayer life regularly, you're committed to your spouse, and you invest in the skills, 8 hours a year on just practicing skills, having a good marriage, your marriage outcomes are going to be through the roof. It's going to be far better. But your original question was a great one, right? What do you do? Because we're in the world. It's after the fall. There's people who have experienced hurt and trauma, right? And so first, we have on our for our pastors who work with us, we have a set of training modules on teaching and speaking to those who have experienced trauma. And there's particularly, we partnered with a research firm to understand the psychological drivers and barriers to get married and stay married. And that trauma is a big thing. And just a couple nuggets for the listeners here. A big thing is to help people know that they have agency. Okay, they are not the sum result of the trauma that they've experienced. They do not have to repeat the rhyme scheme of the family of origin that they've come from. Yeah. And when the church helps people know that, and then know, you know what, it's not a great mystery how to discern whether or not who's a good spouse. There's a lot of good learning out there that we can help you to discern well and to avoid the pitfalls that most commonly lead to a marriage that might fail. And then you can learn those skills in marriage, both before and during, and practice them during marriage. And you can actually have a beautiful and happy, God-affirming marriage, and we'll help you do that. Okay, if we come alongside those who have experienced trauma and family breakdown of different sorts, and help them with that kind of a message, and make our that local church, that school of love, it's so important. I want to make sure it's also we live in a time where the culture is the evil one is a prowling lion, and we need good spiritual formation. We need this. We need good discipleship. Okay, we need that. But in my life, as a married person, we also have to understand we need also the good human formation that'll allow me to also grow spiritually, right? Where somebody has deficits in their human formation, it can sometimes slow and impede spiritual growth, right? And so we should not see those things as in contradiction to each other. All truth is God's truth, and so we can help folks know how to form a godly relationship, a Christ-centered relationship, and there's both spiritual and human skills that we can and should learn, and as we discern relationships well, and then live married life.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if someone listening to this, again, a church leader, a pastor, wanted to take a few steps to better nurture, cultivate healthy marriages and relationships in their congregation, what advice would you give to them?
Yeah. First off, I would make it lead by example. If you're a pastor, a teaching pastor, and you're married, okay, make it a point to go yourself on a good marriage retreat every year, okay, and then let your people know that's what you did. Okay, normalize it by the way you live. Okay, normalize it by hosting. Have your church host a marriage retreat every year, and point out that marriage. You know what? Marriage ministry is for everybody. Yeah. It's for, if you've got a great marriage, right? On this side of the eschaton, I'm a work in progress. We all are. Yeah. Right? Nobody ever says, no, enough holiness for me. I've hit my level. But Scott, he could probably use some more holiness. No, we don't do that, right? And so the encouragement that everybody, this is a place where everybody invests in their marriages. And when we have a great marriage, we can always make it even greater on this side. Until we get to the other side of the eschaton, we can always grow. We can always improve. And normalizing that would be a really powerful way that any church leader could advance the ball substantially.
Yeah. Yeah. That example is so crucial because it almost gives permission to others to walk through things or to say, hey, yeah, we are going to do a marriage retreat or marriage counseling, or we're going to take these steps because I see somebody who's doing that as well. And, that really frees people up at times then to take those steps they need to take.
Yeah, and at Communio, we do that with all of our staff, right? We have a stipend. We put our money where our mouth is. Okay, you get time off from work, and we'll pay and cover the cost of attending a marriage retreat annually. Awesome. I go, my wife and I, we just went on one 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
and we love doing it. And I can tell you also, in my life in doing this kind of work, I have some friends that I've engaged with over the years who start coming out and confiding in you that they're struggling and just saying, Christine and I are going on a marriage retreat in 2 weeks. Why don't you come with us?
Yeah.
Okay. It's so much more effective to invite to something that you have done. It's more compelling. It's more likely to see that person do well. If JP's doing it, maybe it can't be that bad. 100%. We need to be walking the walk, and encouraging it. And I'll say, you mentioned counseling. I just to double click on that for a moment. Of those couples who go into crisis, okay. 70% of all divorces are actually considered what you would call low conflict divorces. But experts would note that about 70% of those couples would actually have been better served by effective skills coaching, okay, before going to counseling. Okay, a lot of times the difference between a coach and a counselor is going to be your Yoda, so to speak, right?
Sure.
Your expert, give you guidance, tell you which, help you make the right decisions. A coach isn't. A coach is going to give you some tools, coach you on effective communication skills, empathy, developing empathy, being better at showing and receiving appreciation. Just different keys. There's 5 intrapersonal skills and 5 interpersonal skills that there's an academic field called marriage and relationship education has uncovered. That if you're good at those, you're gonna rock it at marriage. You're gonna be great at it. Okay, and in good coaching, a church can coach couples on how to become better at those skills, and the coach will demonstrate. Like, let me show you how me and my wife do it. Now you do it. I'm going to observe you. Now I'm going to help adjust. Like, this is how to use that tool, and oftentimes that is a far better first step for most couples. And a good coach will be resourced on, hey, this is a challenge that goes beyond coaching, and now I'm going to send you to counseling, right? To help that you really need based on what you're sharing.
Yeah. I think that's really helpful to draw that distinction for people, and certainly helpful for those looking to kind of maybe even take some of those steps, or church leaders looking to recommend those steps. Now, one of the things that we love doing on this podcast is having conversations that help empower healthy churches. That's really the goal. And so we'd like to hear from everybody. In your opinion, what is one essential component of a healthy church?
Look, I love, you hear that the home is sometimes referred to as the domestic church. Well, the church is really an ecclesial family, right? And each imitate the other, right? We know from Ephesians 5 that Christ is the bridegroom and the church is the bride, right? And so for a church to be healthy, we have to stimulate the health of the bride and the bridegroom. We just have to. Within all of the brides and the bridegrooms in our church, we want to come alongside them to grow and make it fun for them to do it. And actually, there's simple ways that we can do it. We don't need to begin by majoring on the hardest levels of difficulty. There's good research that says regular date nights, couples who regularly date, okay, are going to have better marriage outcomes than those who don't. So maybe a simple thing for a church is to encourage a dating culture for all your married people. Your married people should be continuing to date each other. Yeah. And our ministry, Communio, we work with churches and we provide some how-to playbooks on how to be creative in these ways and to really build a vibrant ministry that helps both the singles and the marrieds. And there's some creative ways that we're seeing churches engage in these areas. And because they're filling a felt need, those local churches are growing. On average, our partner churches, after about 12 to 23 months, are growing about 22%. Wow. And this is frequently seen through the attractiveness of these couples, young families having fun in their relationships, having fun in their marriages again, and seeing that the local church is a conduit and speaking the truths of the gospel into those relationships as a result of the new relationships that the church has been able to form with the unchurched through that felt need. Yeah.
Will you help people just learn some next steps if they want to learn more about Communio, connect with you, get some resources?
Yeah. First thing, I'd absolutely encourage your listeners. We've got some free resources. The nationwide study on faith and relationships is the first thing I would grab. It's free and it's downloadable. Communio.org/study. You can get it, download it. You should. It's robust with survey data from about 19,000 Sunday churchgoers across, I believe, 13 states and 112 congregations. And I've touched on some of the findings here. Then there's 10 takeaways at the end of the study, 10 takeaways for church leaders in that study. And a lot of good actionable stuff there. And so that's a good first step. You can certainly, we have church engagement officers who talk with and consult with and provide advice to churches around the country. And you can certainly get in touch with me or anyone on our team. Our folks can contact us. I'll give my own email if folks want to get in touch with us. It's just my first initial last name at communio.org. So it's J D Gance at Communio, COMMUNIO.org. And I'm happy to direct you to the right person in our team to think how you guys can make your church a marriage church, help it to be known in the community as a place where healthy relationships and marriages, that's a place where something's different there. People want to climb in the windows to figure out what's happening. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll certainly link to all of that just to make it easy on folks and encourage them to check that out. Now, we do have kind of a final section of our show. It's more rapid fire, quick questions coming your way. Call it our final 5. I'm going to jump into that. The first one is, what is one book you'd recommend to church leaders?
Get Married by Dr. Brad Wilcox. Get it, read it. It's amazing data in there, super relevant.
Nice. What is the last thing that you listened to, whether it's Spotify, Apple Music, however?
Ooh, okay. I am totally right now deep into the Revolutions podcast by Mike Duncan. I think I just listened to his podcast on the last episode on the revolutions of 1848. So I'm driving around listening to it.
Nice. What is your favorite piece of technology or software? And only rule on this when you can't see your phone.
Okay. I've got let's see, my favorite piece of technology or software. Well, I will say I love my sports apps. CBS Sports. I use that one a bunch for my boys and I. We love watching live sports together. And I've got a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old at home. And it's quick. I can check to see what's on. I'm driving home, and the boys let me know, hey, game tip off at 7:30 on ESPN. So
Yeah.
it's a fun way for us to spend some time together.
I love it. What's a quote or a piece of advice that has stuck with you over the years?
Edmund Burke is, there's a lot of quotes that are attributed to him, but the one I love the most is that there is nothing that will not yield to perseverance and method. And I think in the church, what we can do is frequently look around and see the world around us and be tempted to curse the darkness. And forgetting, of course, and none of us completely forgets this, but emotionally we can, I think, forget that we're the light. Christ acting in us. Christ is the light, right? But as members of his body, we bring that light into the world. And while things may look bleak at different times, that quote that, of not giving up and not yielding, but continuing to persevere and apply new and cutting edge methods is important.
Yeah. All right. Last one. What is one thing that you'd like to communicate to our audience of church leaders?
Marriage is the first institution. It's what God created in the garden, and the Bible's bookended with it. And it begins in Genesis and ends with the eschatological wedding feast of the Lamb. It's throughout. It's the most common analogy for salvation. God's love for his people is told in a spousal way. And we see this in the Psalms. We see it in the Songs of Solomon. We see it in the prophet Isaiah. We see it powerfully in the minor prophet Hosea, right? And we see it in Paul's writings. It's everywhere. And I know we're tempted because of the brokenness that we see in the world around us to maybe not talk as much about that. We're tempted there's a lot of woundedness, there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of those who aren't married in our churches. And so we I think to our own great peril, we choose not to be proactive in this area, not to hurt feelings. And I think there are great ways that the church can and should be positive and proactive on this message, because if more and more people experience the earthly love that is the human icon of God's love for humanity, it'll be easier and easier for people to accept the divine love story, and that we're a part of that love story. Yeah. Well, we so appreciate your time, JP, just sharing with our audience and encouraging them. Again, we'll link to a lot of those resources that you shared so that people can check those out. But yeah, just so appreciate you taking the time today. And really grateful for those of you listening or watching. We hope that it's been helpful. We hope that you've been encouraged. And again, we hope that it helps empower healthy churches. If it has, we would encourage you to share this with somebody, whether you send them the link, whether you leave a review, subscribe, whatever it is. That just helps us get these conversations into more church leaders' ears. So we would certainly appreciate that. And we will see you next time as we have another conversation that helps empower healthy churches.
This episode of the Church Leadership Lab podcast is brought to you by Ministry Brands, the largest provider of church technology software. Over 90,000 churches rely on Ministry Brands for their single platform solution that brings together all the digital tools a church needs. From online giving to websites to church management software and more, Ministry Brands is leading the way in simple to use, innovative solutions, all with the goal of empowering healthy churches. To learn more, visit ministrybrands.com.